Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Full Swing Thoughts, a podcast on the new Netflix golf docuseries, also titled Full Swing. That's a cheeky little title, spinoff name we've come up for this podcast feed. Episode 1 here, we're joined by Andy Johnson of the Fried Egg and the Shotgun Start. I am Brendan Porath of the Fried Egg and the Shotgun Start. And we're joined by a third man in the booth, Joseph LaMagna, a friend of the program, often contributor to the Fried Egg podcast and the Fried Egg website. Joseph, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, we've been pumped. We're going to jump into it here. Episode 1 of the show, Full Swing, is titled Frenemies. It begins with an intro to the tour. It's our intro to the show. The show begins with an intro to the tour. It's kind of like a trailer. They may have even released like a large portion of this as a kind of a faux trailer in advance of the debut of the show on February 15th. And it's our first experience with the style, the appearance, the sound of this show. It focuses, episode 1, largely on the relationship between Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth. The scenes are largely Harbour Town, where Jordan Spieth won last year, and the PGA Championship, where Justin Thomas won. And that main story is sort of that relationship. But first off, guys, what did you think of just the look and feel as it got started? That kind of introduction to the show, the sound, and the production of it.
Yeah, I really like it. One of the things I like that is clearly shown in episode 1 is that each episode, and if you've followed the F1 show or tennis, like each episode's going to have a very clear storyline, and I think I like how defined it is. I like the somewhat inside access that you're getting with this. So I really enjoyed the way that it's set up, and I think what it does is it makes it very approachable for a wide audience. You know, this is something that I think as somebody who follows the sport about as close as you can follow it, I gleaned new insights, new information from it, but I don't think it's unapproachable for somebody that has never watched professional golf before.
Joseph, what did you make of just sort of the presentation right off the bat?
Yeah, I think it's great. The production value is really high, and I'm excited about that. I think this is as close to like a Real Housewives type feel of a show as golf fans are going to get. So I'm kind of excited for that piece of it and seeing the players who know when the camera's on them. How do they respond? Like, to what extent do they play certain things up where it's inauthentic versus some of the guys who really shine through as being a little bit more down to earth? Like, I'm excited for all of those components since that's something that's new to golf.
Should we go to our first segment, real versus fake?
Yeah, all right. You want to just dovetail it into that? Okay, that's
Wait, talked
fine.
about inauthentic and authentic, when the cameras are on, when the cameras are off.
Most staged from episode 1. So this is, again, the Spieth Thomas thing. What do you have for this? I think we probably have maybe similar answers for this one. Andy, do you want to go ahead?
I got there's 2 contenders. So if I have to pick one of, I guess I'll say this is fake. The phone call about the best man speech.
Yo, it's so bad. Yep, we all have it.
Awful.
I think JT does a horrible sell of it, and immediately you're just like, your alarm bells start going off because he's driving his car. He's like, oh, look, there's there's Jordan calling me now, and he just says it with such kind of an inauthentic way, and then nothing happens. And Spieth clearly at his ad shoot, and they tell him to go sit on the hood of the car and FaceTime him,
and he's got the AT&T out,
and nothing happens. Joseph, is that your most staged? Like, it was clearly the most staged part of this.
Yeah, and it's like a bigger note I had was we know when the players know the camera is on, and we don't need a lot of those moments. Like, a lot of golf stands on its own, which we'll probably get to with some things that happen later in the episode. But when we know the camera's on and the players know the camera's on, that's not compelling. So I thought that phone conversation was an immediate turnoff, and I'm looking forward to the show redeeming itself for the rest of the series.
What was amusing was nothing came of that. Nothing was actually said in the phone call either. Like, it was kind of a red flag staging scene, but then like they don't discuss anything. He's like, just stick to your instincts. Okay, I will. So I won't change anything, and that's it. Like, nothing amusing or interesting was said in the course of that very short phone call. Any other contenders, Andy? You mentioned like there's another one.
I want the pick
the cart boy.
No, pick a card.
Okay. All right.
And pick a card in the plane for
What about it?
$1,000.
What about it?
I don't know. Do you think it was real or staged?
You
That
think
was one
that's
that
how they?
jumped off. I can't foresee, why would they play that game? Why would that be the game that they play when they're on a plane?
It's a really lame way to gamble. And I think that probably those
Yeah.
guys do gamble together and maybe on the plane. And they were like, all right, what's something we can think of that it's an example of us putting a lot of money on something? And they just did pull a card. But there's no way those guys play that game with any
It's what
regularity.
you get 1 in
What is
52
that?
odds.
What
1
is
in
that
52
game?
odds that you get it right, and you're betting $1,000 a pop. Who's taking that bet?
Can I just say, contra to that, like that feels like a thing we should do on a private jet that shows we gamble a lot in like kind of capricious ways. And I thought contra to that, the most relatable thing and non-PJ thing they were doing was having Bell's. They were having Bell's craft beer. Bell's, I think Jordan Spieth had a two-hearted, and JT was having the summer, the Oberon. And I was just like,
Oberon.
this is just not what, like, people are having champagne or cocktails or like hard liquor on a plane. And I just thought it was like the most, I'm not saying it's like Bud Light. I thought that was an amusing, like, these guys are pretty normal guys having beer on their private jet is not, it just didn't, it seemed incongruous with the setting as opposed to the card game for $1,000.
I liked the beer thing, like that.
Yeah,
that
I agree.
That was like something that I would if I was on a plane, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna have a beer. It wouldn't matter what time of day it was, having a beer. I also liked I thought like them going and playing that practice round was a nice setup to the PGA storyline. We could talk about stuff that the main things of takeaways of the episode. But I just saw the segue for the real versus fake right
I
there.
gotcha.
You Joseph hung it out there. So
I'm throwing one more nominee in that, and it's JT with the cart boy at Medalist saying, I got to do some things for myself. I got to put the bag on myself. You don't need to do this. Just, I don't know. I think Justin may utilize the help around the course more often than, quite a bit. I don't know. That's all I'll say. We heard different things, but that was an amusing, like, weird staging.
Something I've always wondered, if I was at home for a while, I don't understand the keeping the bag in the staff bag.
The cart,
like,
the big.
Yeah, why are we using the cart bag? Like, I wouldn't be able to wait to get my clubs out of my staff bag. Like, it would be I'm on the road only time. I'd have like the other bag, like a normal person bag, like ready to go. Because like if I'm going to my
that Southern Hills, you had like an AT&T, like it had all the branding on it, but it was a stand bag.
Yeah, it'd have golf balls in it, it'd have tees in it, it'd have like the things that I need, and it would just be a simple take the clubs out of one bag, put them into the other bag. Like immediately when I went to the golf course, because the other thing is like I want something more discreet. I don't want like all the members at Medalist to be like, oh look, it's JT. Like I don't want them to know. Like, but that might be the difference between me and JT and why he's one of the main reasons he's on the PGA Tour, and I'm talking about full swing here with you two.
Yep. All right. So those are some of the minutia. We just jumped right into the minutia. We should do overall high level takeaways from this episode. Again, my whole thing, like right away, my big takeaway, and this is before we get to the substance. I had heard, not to color anyone's opinion, I heard episode 1 wasn't great. I was impressed just with, like you guys said, the different look, the different feel. Don't even get into the substance. Don't even get into the substance of what happens. It just feels like a totally different product about a sport that I love, about characters that I know, presented in a totally different, unique way. And I think just that uniqueness in itself made it good for me as a start. Now, you may disagree. Let's go into what you thought of the episode generally. What was your one main takeaway? Joseph, take it away.
Yeah, my big takeaway. So obviously just the high level of what happens in the episode, right? First, we're at RBC Heritage, and then we quickly get to the PGA Championship and a recap of what happens at the PGA Championship. One thing that was striking to me was that one of the biggest moments I remember from the 2022 season was really not captured, and it happened at the PGA Championship, and it was Tiger Woods battling an injury to make the cut and then having to withdraw after his Saturday round. And that's not to be critical of Netflix for omitting that storyline, but I think what I realized, and this is my bigger takeaway, is that the Netflix show is about these new characters on tour. Episode 1 was about Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas. And I think what I was realizing is it seems like this might mark sort of a formal transition off of the Tiger Woods era. Like, we've been on his back for so long and carrying storylines that maybe the Netflix show is an effort to start to star build around some of the other guys and kind of get away from Tiger Woods carrying the entire product. Is that something that anybody else picked up on or had a similar thought?
There's no doubt about that. I also, though, was lamenting that Tiger and Phil make a quick appearance and they're not really a part of what I think is going to be a historical document of this moment in time. And Phil's like just it's third person about how he's missing a title defense, and Tiger's like they can shoot him because they have rights to the PGA, and it's him on the first tee and making his return. And it just feels like I like your point there about how it could be the turning of the page, but I kind of lament their voices or them not being a larger part of this show as like it's going to be a historical document. I would think maybe it's gone, maybe it's forgotten in a couple of years. I don't know.
I think this is an editorial decision, and I side more with Joseph. I was talking with somebody just this last week about this. It's amazing to have Tiger Woods at major championships. I love when he plays major championship golf. But what he does is he sucks the oxygen out of everything else going on at said major championship. And you have to look no further than the Masters with Scotty Scheffler. What happened on the ground there? You had the hottest player ever, like in the world, coming in, and he got no air. So with this, I think this was a huge decision. Like, is Tiger going to be the big story of almost every episode of the show, or is he not? And I think they leaned on him being a part of it, but a very side part of it, which I think was smart in order to establish and grow these characters that are not Tiger Woods, that are part of a week in, week out PGA Tour golf.
Well, part of that is not necessarily by choice, though, too, because he did not agree to the series. Had he agreed to the series, I think they would make him a big part of it, right? I mean, yeah, they made it an editorial. Yeah, I think it's a smart choice to not lean too much on having to tell the story of Tiger Woods. Like the F1 series, season 1 goes without Mercedes and Ferrari because they didn't agree to it, and it's still dynamite, right? It's fantastic, and that's sort of what I think they're doing here. And I don't think it's going to take away at all from the excitement of this. But had Tiger agreed to it, I would think he would be prominently featured.
Maybe, but honestly, I think the editorial decision is additive in getting away from Tiger Woods a little bit. I kind of disagree with you, Brendan, that it would be that you were lamenting that he's not a part of this historical document, because I think a lot of casual fans tune into golf tournaments specifically if Tiger Woods is playing. And we have to move past that at some point. If this is the introduction into golf for a lot of people, I think it kind of makes sense that we get away from relying on Tiger Woods, and this might be that chance.
But I just think the story of golf last year, not having only secondhand Phil footage from Kiowa and Spieth answering a question about him is like hard to tell the story of golf, and maybe that's not the point of the show. You know, it may not be the primary point of the show, but that's maybe it's not a historical document. And I'm contextualizing this completely wrong, but that was my only concern.
My takeaway was that this was a really poor selection as a first episode. I think there were some misses in the episode, but overall, I thought it seemed like it was more to get Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas, two of the biggest stars in the game, on episode 1, more so than what's the right coherent story to put as number 1, and what would set up in terms of the time. Like, you know, they're introducing the show to people that don't understand, that aren't necessarily avid PGA Tour fans, that aren't avid golf fans. And you start the year, or the series with a tournament that happens after the Masters, and then the weird. Second major of the year versus, I think the cameras started to roll at Waste Management. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but the next episode is about two high profile players, and they profile Waste Management and the Masters. And it's like, this just doesn't make sense. It's very disorienting time-wise. It's like, oh, we're going to start this, and we're throwing you right into the middle of the season. And really, if you look at a PGA Tour season, almost the back half of the season with the first episode, and it didn't make a lot of like congruent set. I didn't feel like it set the show up the right way.
Well,
And I think it just the pure selection of this as the first episode did the episode tremendous harm. It would be a better episode later in the season as a standalone episode. I think the other aspect of the episode that was a big miss for me was the failure to really contextualize that Jordan, they kind of like lightly touched this, but refused to say it, that Jordan Spieth came out gangbusters and was like this great player. But in the last 4 years, Justin Thomas has been a discernibly better golfer, and they refused to say this. And it was really frustrating because like that's a very important aspect of this story that needs to be told.
It was wild as like people who are in this week to week, right? To see this framed in the way that it was framed right now in 2023. Just on your first point on the ordering, you'll recall from that Sam Shuby GQ profile that I think episode 2, Kepka Scheffler, which was like more chronologically made sense, was the first episode. And then some Netflix suits came in and said it's too sad to start the series. So it sounds like that was a late change, maybe out of the hands of the people that were directly involved in this show. I don't know, but that was a nugget from that GQ. I don't know if you guys remember that, where they kind of flipped it on them late. And maybe, like you said, it didn't work necessarily for us.
Well, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
You know, and this, we'll get into this in the next episode, but I watched the second episode and I was like, this is the first episode.
Right.
And
Well,
this is not the first episode. Like this just wasn't,
It
this
seems
wasn't
like
a first episode.
that was a late change. It sounds like that was a late change from like higher ups at Netflix because I don't know, it's too dour and sad. Brooks, go ahead.
I do think where that could do harm is where there's this balance between has somebody never watched golf before and also catering to somebody who's really into golf to provide entertainment. And there's parts where they explain like what a birdie is and what a par is. But
one
at the
round
same time,
is 18 holes.
but they don't, which I think is great, but they don't explain where we are in the season. And I think a casual fan might have thought the RBC Heritage is the first event of the season. And then the PGA Championship was the next week. They never explained that they just shot us into the middle of the year. So I agree with you, Andy. I think it was disconcerting. And I do think it did a disservice to the show as a whole, but I'm so optimistic on the rest of the series that starting with a low bar might not be a bad thing.
Right. I get, my whole question was like, why it has to be so hard. There are so many ways to go and so many weeks and players. Like they start with the PGA for better or for more or less, right? It's the PGA is this episode. But it's like, it's all JT related. There's nothing like with Mito or Zalatoris or anything like, so it's just, those are the choices they have to make. Like there's not a PGA episode. It's a JT Spieth episode. And then they work in what they can from the PGA. Those are the choices they have to make. Getting back to Andy's second point about just how they orient us in the state of the JT Spieth relationship, one of my main takeaways was it seems like it comes across as Spieth being the far less, quote unquote, tortured of the two, right? Well, they go and talk to him. He goes, oh, like swing got a little off this week, which happens, and I just didn't make anything. And there you have like JT just like with his dad, like grinding through it, right? He has that quote, how quickly you can fall off and just not be who you are, who you were anymore. That was a dynamite quote. Like his person and his self was defined by all of a sudden not having the same swing as he had the day before. They make JT to be like, quite honestly, the guy we've come to know and love with Spieth, with the self-talk and the swing that's that trigger, can't pull, like all these swing thoughts. It was interesting how they portrayed it as, you know, Spieth is this far more accomplished player. And I guess if you're running the major tally, that's still the case. But it was a throwback for me to like, this isn't really the nature of this relationship in 2023 or 2022. It was maybe in 2017. Do you agree with that?
Well, one counterpoint to that. It's interesting you guys both called that out. One quote I have written down was from Sean Foley. Did anyone else
Yes. He just
write
like
this
was
down?
afraid. He seemed like he was just afraid to say what he really wanted to say.
But he did still say it. And I thought it was interesting that he said, you could say that Justin has closed the gap on Jordan, but Jordan still has the potential to be great. And I think that was a pretty interesting line that he said Jordan still has the potential to be great, which means Jordan's not great right now. And he did say it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not, it makes it sound like he's in the wash, right? He's not where, I mean, it's an admission that one day he could come back again, right? And that was like the only real indication we got that Spieth wasn't like the complete top dog in this two-man friendship.
I want to also just in terms of saying this episode's a miss, I wanted to contextualize like tackling JT and Spieth is in 45 minutes is a near impossible task. Like that is the flip side of this, is that this is extremely hard. There's stuff that you have to cut in 45 minutes. Like you know, they shot a lot, but one of the things was like I felt like the majority of the insight into these guys came from external people. Like whether it was Mike Thomas or Sean Foley's quote, like, you know, that's where I got the majority of my insight into these two guys.
Well, like they're two of the most exciting golfers to watch and follow, like the roller coaster that's Spieth and JT, the best shot maker maybe in the game. But then they're like for being millionaire athletes, they're probably two of the more relatable, like normal dudes out there. Like, are they like, I don't get much from Jordan Spieth at a commercial shoot. Like, it's like a white bread commercial shoot. And like, I think he's an interesting guy. He's probably more interesting golfer, right? Like, it's hard to tell. It's a cool relationship to spotlight, but you know, I think like compared to Brooks in episode 2, they seem much more normal, right? It's going to be a less entertainment factor, if that makes sense.
Well, hold on. I think one thing that we have not said that needs to be said is that the title of the episode is Frenemies.
Frenemies, yeah.
And that's not a dynamic that I think is authentic to the Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas relationship. For example, them showing a leaderboard and showing Justin Thomas and then where Jordan Spieth is on the leaderboard. I have never felt when watching a PGA Tour event like, oh, Jordan's got Justin this week or Justin's got Jordan this week. I don't think that's an authentic storyline. I'm sure they're competitive with each other. But to show the leaderboard, I don't think Jordan Spieth is worried about anything besides finishing in first place. And so to make it out like there's this back and forth of who's going to win this week, Justin or Jordan, I don't think that's how golf fans experience the season ever.
No, that's a good point.
They didn't really like go into either of their, like one of the things, the voids I felt like, and is that they didn't really go into either of their, I think what makes golf and the stars interesting is these are two superstars of the sport who play wildly different styles of the game. And there was not any talk of any of that whatsoever. Like what makes them, they're friends, but they play completely different styles, their psyches, like that's where I think the big miss was, going back to like the overall thought was like, you know, for a regular fan, like somebody picking up the sport, I felt like you didn't get anything out of like who these guys are and what they, you know, what they did outside of like what really, like Mike Thomas, I thought was the star of the whole show.
He was awesome. He was really good. Do you want to talk about that? Should we do a little Mike Thomas? Now like a dad in youth sports, like I'm not talking about my personal experience, but like Mike Thomas is most compelling when he's like this push and pull of being his coach, obviously, and being his dad. And it's like, it is a game. You want him to get enjoyment out of it. And there's moments where they're on the range at Medalist. And he's like, I fucking hate that, right? He's just shouting, like kind of the air, but also at his dad and the iPad. There's that Saturday at Southern Hills, which I think is some of the best footage as like hardcore golf nuts, right? We had heard about that range session where Mike Thomas said Bones got in his ear, and like I had to back off. Justin doesn't listen to me. Like at some point, like I'm just his dad, and he thinks I'm being too soft on him. And Bones like kind of snapped him into what would become that amazing comeback. So I think there was that cool behind the scenes footage of that frustrating range session Saturday, which is good for me. But Thomas was, I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming from this show. Is like talking about his own father being really hard on him. And I thought that was incredibly moving. He's emotional talking about it and how like he just does not want to do that to Justin. He didn't want to ever feel like it was work. And that fine line between like being his coach and pushing him to be good and also taking any kind of enjoyment and joy out of the game has to be a constant struggle. He was really compelling.
I loved his quote about the struggle of a top player where they get frustrated and like getting them to come back to the like, you're really good at this. Like, they get so in the
Yeah.
weeds and so down, like where they think they suck, but it's like just trying to recenter them on like, you're really good at this. It's like, it was a fascinating. I thought he was great. I thought, as somebody, he's always around in tournaments, and it seems like he kind of like has this like little bit of like a Butch Harmon type of persona that he puts on. I This was really revealing for me of like I'm really fascinated in Mike Thomas as in that whole relationship. That was the big thing that I think I gleaned from this more than anything else, was that relationship and how interesting it is.
One of my main notes, and this is especially what you were saying, Brendan, with just Mike Thomas, the dad versus the coach. Like, when you're at a youth sports game, like a basketball game, and there's a parent who's screaming at the referees, like,
Yeah.
that's usually the kid's usually not very good, right? That's not usually the parent of a superstar. And I think Mike Thomas is a great example of the parent who has it in perspective, can deliver the message in the right way, but understands that screaming at his kid is not what's going to be in the best interest. And I thought that was a big takeaway for me, is that Mike Thomas kind of has this all in perspective.
Yeah. So is there any doubt, like, did you guys, this is larger like golf analyst question. Is there any doubt like that's the right arrangement? Should Mike Thomas not be his coach and just be his dad? Is there someone that JT should have come in that is harder on him, or that it like, is that balance? It seems to be working. I'm not like casting doubt on anything, but it sounds like that's a struggle at times. And could JT benefit from a different kind of voice? Or is that
I think
Bones?
what's really helped him is he's always had a veteran caddy too.
Yeah.
I think that's the one of the smart things that they've done, is that having that experienced caddy can kind of act as that balance, right? And I think like a lot of guys, and we'll probably see it later. I'm not sure if we see it later, but like getting into the entourages of some of these guys like that they have around, like, I think having like a consistent small core is, that's, I mean, Tiger never had a lot of people. Like, if you go through down the line of like enduring stars, have any of them really had a lot of people around them?
Jumbo Ozaki. No, I don't know. There's no one that really jumps to mind. It's not a prevalent thing with golf. I'm
Like
trying to think of
Bryson obviously
camps.
would be the
Yeah,
example
Bryson.
of
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
ton of guys, but he didn't really sustain. Like, I think like the more people you have around you, the more distracting it almost can be.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Go
the
ahead.
only part on should it be Mike Thomas or not, as Justin's coach, I think something I've learned more and more is that probably the most important thing is being comfortable when you're on the golf course. And as soon as it gets uncomfortable in the car or at home, wherever, then maybe you'd want to create a little bit of a distance in that. Okay, fine, you're just my dad now, not your coach. If it's working and Justin's comfortable and Mike's comfortable, like, let it fly. I
Yeah.
don't know that it matters either way. I don't think it matters if it's his mom, his dad, who his swing coach is. You just have to be comfortable.
Well, while we're on the subject of the father son, there's going to be backlash from the golf diehards about the home videos. Like, oh my god, I saw 500 Citigroup commercials about from way to go, Jay. But like, that's like for the general audience, right? Like when I watched the F1 show, I didn't know Carlos Sainz's dad was a driver, and I didn't know how that works and how he came up in the sport of F1 or the sport of motor racing. And so like that's like to orient the like general watcher who doesn't know anything about Mike Thomas. So I think that was useful and additive.
One last thing on the father son relationship that I thought was really really like, I was kind of shocked by it. I didn't remember this from the PGA, but like, Usually when somebody wins a major championship, the first person after the caddy is the significant other. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but with JT, the first person was dad, then mom, then fiance. And
Yep.
it was an interesting, like, I've never seen that order. They're all there, and it almost like de facto. And if you think about like your own life, like if you have something big that happens in your life, like, I call my wife like first thing. That's all. That's like my first call, and like my parents are going to be shortly after that. But like, and it was just interesting. I think it shows like that relationship with his dad, and how just that's the relationship in his life. And I it
Well, and last thing,
I,
before we move on from Mike Thomas, I also think it's interesting how good of friends the Thomases have become with Tiger, and knowing what Tiger's relationship with his dad was like. I'm sure Tiger and Mike Thomas see a little bit eye to eye on this and have things in a little bit more of a perspective. You can do the hard nosed approach like Tiger's dad, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is there anything like crazy or new you learned about Spieth, or you thought was insightful or revelatory about the Spieth portion of this? Because we've talked a lot about, I think JT and his dad were the main takeaways for us, but what about Spieth?
I just felt like that's where this if I were to zoom out and say like where did this really fall short for me was the Spieth thing. Like I just felt like it didn't really get into anything
The most,
about Spieth. Like I just there was no zero depth there.
the part that like stuck out to me was when he was caught on camera, or like he knows he's on camera saying "fuck you, Justin" during the practice round, and I thought like I didn't get a lot from that Southern Hills practice round, to be honest with you. I know there was like an opportunity to. They're telling a general story about them gambling and being friends. I don't need to know how they like plot their way around a golf course, but yeah, for Spieth, and maybe that's just who he is. I don't know, but I didn't get. I got far less out of it as
I
it
was gonna
relates to
say,
Spieth.
I think I kind of that's who Jordan Spieth is, and I felt like of the two of them, he
Yeah.
was more like himself on camera than Justin Thomas was. Like Jordan kind of acts the same no matter what. He's the type of player who's not running his own Twitter account or running his own Instagram account. Somebody else is posting for him. He has always created a little bit of that distance. So to me, in the episode, did I learn more about Jordan? No, but he was exactly who I thought he was. And I think that was an accurate representation to the casual fan, the new golf fan, of what they should expect from Jordan Spieth.
I think there's something about um Spieth is almost like golf's like teenage movie star, because he had such success early on and young. He had this team built out and he didn't do anything that other people did. Like on the like when players are coming up, they don't have they don't have the need to have a big team around them, right? If
Mhm.
you think about like JT has more like a great example is JT's relationship with No Laying Up, right? Like they became friends before JT was a superstar, like with Chris Solomon. Like, when he was the 50th ranked player in the world, they were friends. And Jordan was never that guy, Like Jordan was immediately a superstar in this sport. And I think it makes him more guarded. He has had like that media training that don't let anybody in, don't be like I don't think we saw a shred of who Jordan Spieth really is. You say this is who he is. I don't think that Jordan Spieth has ever given the public a shred of who he is at home. Like, what do you know about Jordan Spieth and like what he likes? Like nobody knows anything. And this is where this episode I think falls a lot very short, is that we didn't get anything more about Jordan Spieth, which is, kind of the point of the show.
Maybe he's just a normal, well-adjusted dude, unlike a child actor. I mean, maybe he really is just completely well-adjusted without a whole lot, to offer at least this past season. I don't know. It's interesting, but yes, we missed on that. Go ahead.
You want to get into ancillary notes?
Yeah, let's hit some notes real quick. Let's do most amusing. Can we do most amusing moment? Did you guys have anything that jumped out to you? I'm gonna let me lead real quick
What was
with
your
the
did you have a big takeaway, Brendan?
I thought it was more like how they portrayed similar to Andy's JT versus Spieth. Like Spieth seeming like he has it completely together and completely even keel, completely like, we just didn't make some putts and you just have an off week with the swing. And he's never too high or low. And JT appears like this tortured soul. He's like constantly trying to find it. And it's really up and down and dramatic. And that's not how we understand either of them, I think, at this point. That was my big takeaway. Did you have one you didn't really articulate, Joseph?
No, my
got
main
it.
one was that we've moved on from Tiger Woods.
Yeah, I like that.
So.
I like that. All right, so amusing moment for me, JT, quote, on Spieth. He's one of my best friends, but I hope I beat him in every single tournament that we play in for the rest of our lives. Ricky, in a way, we're kind of all out there in it together. You do get a sense of satisfaction when you see a friend succeed and do well. Little different perspectives. Maybe that's why they are where they are. Ricky kind of bums me out. This is more a general note. He's like a narrator. He's a narrator, at least for the first two that I've seen. He's filling the gaps.
Is Ricky just a commentator? Is he like a journalist in here? Is that what Ricky is?
So I thought that was amusing. The two senses of like, I've heard this about JT for years. Like he's a killer competitor, psychotic competitor. Even when it's his friends, he wants to destroy Ricky, destroy him. And he says, I want to beat him every single time for the rest of my life against Spieth. And Ricky's like, in a way, we're kind of all out there in it together. Different perspective. I'm sure Ricky also has a competitive side to him, of course. I'm not distilling it down to that one quote. Did you have anything, Joseph, or a reaction to that?
I didn't pick up on it, but it's amusing that you bring that up. And I do think it's illustrative of where they are in their careers.
Anything else amuse you guys in the episode, particularly that we've not hit on already?
Yeah, I got a very few Rory quotes in there, but the one Rory quote really stuck out to me was he said, "It feels like I'm trying to win my first major." When he was talking about how long it's been, the 8 years, and I think that, my God, does that explain what we've been going through the last 4 years of his career and the slow starts? Like, Jesus, that was like one of the most enlightening quotes that I gleaned from this episode was like, and I think that's like one of the cool things about the show is that players, as you just hit on with Ricky, like the way these guys talk about each other kind of opens the door to what they think. But with Rory, that quote, my God.
It's a big one. It was just thrown in there as they were doing like the storytelling of golf and like what majors are versus what non-majors are. And that one just got slipped in there. Whereas like it's been so long, it feels like I'm trying to win my first again. A huge, kind of moment of insight from Rory and a mission from Rory. Anything else on amusements?
So maybe I'm like just not remembering the PGA Championship as well as I should be, but how bad Justin Thomas's allergies were, I do not remember that, and that's a big deal. Not having your energy levels all the way up when you're playing, and then to go on to win. I was not aware of how much he was battling his body that week. I thought that was insightful.
I remembered back that week, I kind of like I was like wondering if he had COVID because of how he sounded in his press conferences, because he sounded awful. Like he sounded really bad. And it was like, God, is this guy like really sick? But, then it came out that it was the allergies. And it was, I mean, that I do like, I forgot some about his round. I forgot the bomb he made on 12. Like he made a huge putt there. I think a big miss, like not a big miss, a small miss. Like they didn't show his shank. They didn't show his like early round struggle
shot. They showed his recovery shot, but didn't have any. Why was he in the trees on the par 3? And I get that's a huge thing they got to decide is like play by play of these events versus
But it was interesting because I don't think they like got to like the heart of like his struggles that like they could have shown his struggles with one shot there, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Are you suggesting that he might have had COVID and that he went to CVS and blamed allergies as a cover-up and this Netflix is part of the cover-up operation?
No, it was just like, that was something that I remember going through my mind early in that week when we were, we're covering the event. That was something that I thought I like heard him talking. I'm like, God, he doesn't sound good. does he have COVID? I had just had COVID too, so it was kind of like
Makes
on
you
the
think.
top of my mind.
Makes you think.
Makes you
All right,
think.
let's
Oh,
do a
God,
couple other like
conspiracy theories.
odds and ends notes to kind of close this out. I think we've hit on a lot of them, sort of rambling on as we do. Mine are more general. We've already hit on a few of them. The golf stuff, the setups are boring. It's not. It's cliche city, and this is before they start Harbor Town. And I get they kind of got to dramatize things before they start Harbor Town. Before they start PGA, like you have Morikawa, like I'm just trying to find everything in sync. DJ, every facet of your game has to be firing all cylinders. And they kind of, I get that they have to do the definitions of what a birdie is and what a round means, but like the real, like sort of golf setups get a little bit empty. And I know that they've got to do some of it, but when you have only so much time across 8 episodes, that gets a little empty.
In the same vein, it does feel like they haven't explained, like, to a great degree, like the difficulty of beating 156 other players compared to in comparison to, like, the tennis one. You're playing one guy. You have to win 7 matches against one person. Golf, that's the thing that makes golf so unique, is that, like, you can play out of your mind and lose, like
Yeah.
you have to beat all guys over 4 days. Like it's not, it's a little bit different than other sports. And I do feel like they did fall short. Like they had those things in there, but they didn't actually just be like, like, tell us about winning a golf tournament. What happened,
I agree with you, Andy. And I think one piece that was missing from a context perspective, they never did anything like, okay, here are the active players right now and how many major championships they have. Like there was nothing for a casual fan to contextualize what it means to win a major championship, except they explained what the Grand Slam is and how many people have won all 4 majors. Outside of that, I think it was probably pretty hard for a newcomer to understand, like, what does the PGA Championship represent? They didn't explain that it changes venues, right? Like they didn't explain a lot about the events.
That's a good point. Other note I had was Sean Foley. I thought he seems like he'll be good. I don't know. You guys sort of were critical of that one quote where he walked up to the line with Spieth. He's a guy that's kind of inside the machine, right? He like knows the game. He's obviously on tour. He's in the locker room, and he's got some pop on camera. Obviously, he's a character. It seems like he could be a good voice for this.
I think of the voices they have, he's the one that will say things that have well, A, expertise behind them, but B, some like original takes, right?
What
I
other
actually
notes did you
wasn't
guys
critical, Brendan. I wasn't critical of his quote. I think he actually said it.
Okay.
So I will give him
Yeah.
props, and I agree with you. I think he'll be good. And the other person I think we could use more of, who does a really good job, is Amanda Renner. I think she's doing an excellent job of actually providing some context for what people are about to see in a succinct way. I think she's excellent.
For setting up tour life for the people who aren't accustomed
Right.
to tour life. Yep. Other notes, odds and ends you guys have. Anything else that we're not hitting on?
I didn't get much from the Harbor Town. Stop.
Yeah. That was more just to, like, honestly continue the narrative, like Spieth up, JT down, right? It was really used as a device in that.
Did you see that? How about the quote when they were playing the practice round where Spieth, it was clearly like a camera thing. It was like, how's your season going, Justin? He's like, pretty average. And how's yours, Jordan? And he's like,
Well, I just
pretty average until I won.
Yeah. Right.
But it's interesting. I think that's kind of where Jordan's head's at, like right now, is I don't
A win.
like a
Any old
win. Any
Yeah.
win is like a big deal for him.
I don't have any other huge odds or ends, Brendan. I think the main thing is we know when the camera's rolling and when it's not. And the scenes that are going to play better are the ones where they feel authentic. Like the retelling of the valet story where Jordan paid to valet Justin's car. Like, I just don't think that translates as well to an engaging Netflix show as just moments like JT on the range waiting for Mito to make bogey, and they're showing us that.
That was a great one.
That's an authentic moment. Like Justin doesn't act differently because the Netflix cameras are there. And I think it's really obvious when he is.
That was one of my highlights, was like that range session Saturday night, and then the Colt Nose like play-by-play where like, here's what's happening. You're going to be in a playoff. You're not. I thought that was really cool. The stuff we don't get and that the show delivered. Anything else? Any other high level things? Is there? I mean, this was just great. Access means everything. Presentation is everything. Do we want to give like, I don't know. Was it a good episode? Was it a bad episode? Where did you guys net out on it? I think just the presentation for me made it sort of a positive. It's on the positive side for me. It's just something different, and by its different and uniqueness, it worked enough for me.
Having seen the second episode, I give this a C.
Okay. All right.
Great. I'd probably give this like a C or a C minus, but it still made me excited for the rest of the series. So I don't think the Frenemies storyline worked, which like kind of undermines the whole episode.
Sure. So
I'll give it a C, somewhere between a C and a C minus.
Okay. I'll go pass for pass fail. I'll punt.
Oh wow! He's afraid. He's afraid to put it out there.
I had heard this one was terrible. I honestly, but it's fine. Maybe I was expecting worse. Okay. Everyone,
Brendan's no Sean Foley. He doesn't say it how it is.
We'll be back to recap episode 2. We're at different points in watching this show. Joseph and I think, are just 1-2. Andy jumped ahead, but we want to. I think that'll add some value.
Everything. I'm watching everything twice.
It'll add some value to kind of what we think about the holistic show versus the specific episode. We'll be back episode 2 on Brooksy and Scotty and some explosive insight into Brooks's mindset. That's next.